Hi there, in this video I want to show you how to prepare your own images, your own photographs, so that you can create successful image transfers on the gel plate. My name's Lori Trumpet and I am an alcohol ink and mixed media artist and lately obsessed with the gel plate. And one of the most common questions I hear in the communities is, how in the world do you do image transfers? So in this video, I'm not only going to show you how I got these beautiful image transfers, but I'm also going to show you how I prepared the images to achieve the desired result. The first step in getting a really successful image transfer on the gel plate is starting out with an image that is high contrast. So we can use our own photographs to create high contrast images that will yield beautiful image transfers that we can use in gel collage or we can use in any printmaking. The first step is picking the right photo. So you need to find a photo that has a good contrast. So as you're looking through your own photos, you want to look at photos that have very defined contrasting colors, either very bright colors that contrast with their background, or detailed photos. And you could also use photos from a stock photography type site like Pixabay. There's quite a few of those out there. There's Unsplash, Pexels.com. Pixabay is one that I go to. I like a lot of the images that I find there. So what we're going to do here in this exercise is we're going to actually look through and find an image that will work. In my experience, a lot of the images that work really well are architectural in nature, and they have buildings and very sharp lines. So I thought we would look through and find an image, and then what we're going to do after that is take it over to Photoshop, and then we're going to open it in Photoshop, work our magic. So let's find an image that would include buildings. So I'm just going to type in buildings and see what comes up. There's some really interesting photos here, but a lot of them, there's not a lot of contrast between the light and the darks and the lines, and that's kind of what I'm looking at here. Anytime you can find an image that is up against like a bright colored sky and there's defined edges, those work really well. So you just have to kind of train your eye to look at that. So I'm scrolling through. I'm not seeing anything yet that's jumping out at me. This is kind of cute here. This is an image of this little Volkswagen. Let's pull that up and look at it. Yeah, we've got some pretty good contrast on this one. Let's pull that one down to try. So I'm going to download it. Okay. And I'm going to look and see if I can find one more. So I'm going to go back and see what I can find. This could probably produce pretty cool. I can already see the dark and the lights there, but I'm just going to, you know what, maybe I'll look for a bridge. A bridge has some really defined lines in it to demonstrate this. Now you can experiment with any photo you want to see what might work, but let's see what we can find here. That one's interesting, which most of these on these public domain websites do. Public domain means that they have the COO license, the Creative Commons license, which means that you are granted permission to use them as reference photos or in your artwork or for derivative works without having to give attribution to the original creator. And I'm still looking for just the right image. You know what? Let's do another search. How about castles? That could be interesting. It's got all these neat little arches. Wish it were a little bit more high definition. This has got good contrast between the background and the foreground. This is a good high contrast image here. That would be interesting to put as onto a collage. Let's just try that. So we'll download this one as well, and I keep them in a reference photo section. So after you have a couple of images downloaded to your computer, then you need to switch over to Photoshop. So I'm doing this demonstration in Photoshop because that's the tool that I use and have used for a long time. You can use other image editing tools. They may or may not have the threshold setting that we're going to be using in Photoshop. But if you do have access to Photoshop, you'll be able to do this really quick and easy. If you're using an app on your phone or some other app, you're going to want to look at a couple of things. One is you need to be able to convert the image to black and white. And then after you convert the image to black and white, you want to look for this feature for contrast. Most of the phone apps have that feature, and definitely all of the desktop apps have the feature to allow you to crank the contrast. So after you convert it to a black and white image, you want to adjust the contrast all the way up and save it, and you may have to go 2 or 3 passes on the contrast. So that's just kind of a workaround. This process that I'm going to show you has yielded the best results for me so far. So this is what I want to show you. I'm going to first open up the Volkswagen image that we downloaded. And there it is. So the first thing that I want to do, I could convert it to grayscale. So go here and convert to grayscale, and that'll discard all the color data. What I like to do is make sure I unlock this background layer in Photoshop. So if you have your layers palette open, you'll need to make sure, if you don't see the layers palette, it's under Windows, and then you just make sure layers is checked. So you want to unlock that layer. You can either double click on it and that'll unlock it, or you can highlight it and check the little lock box here. So now we have it in black and white. We have the background is unlocked. And then what we want to do is go to Image and then Adjustments. And then we're going to want to go to down to Threshold. Now, what Threshold does is make the image a true black and white. That means every pixel on the screen is either black or it's white. Doesn't get more high contrast than that. And the way Photoshop works with it is Photoshop will look at its default levels 128, but you can adjust that level. And if you slide the little slider, you can see what level of detail you're going to get. So remember, when you're making your gel plate prints, everything that's black here will put toner on the paper, and that will resist the paint, which means that it will leave that impression on the plate. So you want to adjust that to your liking. And let's see, I'm going to go a little bit darker with it. There we go. Click OK. And because I work on a 5x7 plate, I want to size it correctly. So to size it, you go to Image Size, so Image, and go to Image Size. And I want it to be, I'm going to put it 2 up on an 8.5 by 11 page so I can print 2 at a time. And so I know that that would mean that I need the width to be less than 8. So I will because the paper is 8.5, and usually the printer will put a 1/2 inch border around it. So I'm going to actually just make it 7.5, and it automatically adjusts the heights if you've got the relationship icon checked. And that's 5. I'm good with that. My resolution is at 300 dpi. I recommend keeping it there. And then click OK. So now I have it sized correctly. If I were to print this, it would print it on the page, and it would take up about half size plate, but it would be formatted well for a 5x7 plate. But what I want to do is now change the canvas size of this to fit an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to change my setting. So what I did was I went to Image and I went to Canvas Size, And I'm going to change my width to 8.5, so that's the size of a standard US piece of paper, letter size, and then 11 inches high. And I want it to push the excess down, so I just hit this little anchor point right here in the center. I'm going to click OK, and that created the page size for me. So now if I just want to duplicate this, all I've got to do is I can either right click on the image here and click duplicate layer, or I could drag it down to the plus sign, drag the layer down to this plus sign here, and it'll create a different layer. So it creates a layer right over the top, so I have to drag one of the layers down to make it two up. So I'm just going to drag that down, and then the adjusting guides will line it up for me. So now I am ready to print this out, and I will print this on my laser printer. File, print, and I always make sure that my printer profile, if you have the option, is set to black and white. That's going to yield the best result. And in the preview, make sure it looks the way you want it to look, and then click print. Okay, now let's convert our balcony image using the same method. So we're going to first open up the file, and here's our balcony image. Okay. And it's already got a transparent background, which is a huge bonus. So on this one, all we need to do is go to Image, Image, and then Threshold, and then we can adjust the threshold for how dark we want it to appear. So if we want it kind of grungy, we can slide it more this way so that there's more grunge in it, or we can go a little bit darker, which I think I will do. There we go. I think I like that. Okay, so click OK. So now the image is black and white, and the contrast is high because we used the threshold feature. And now we want to size it. So we're going to go to image size. We're going to incise this one first to the size we want it. I'm going to stick with the 7.5 inches wide, 300 pixels per inch resolution. Click OK. And then I'm going to go to my canvas size to make the page size the way I want it. I mean, you could print directly from this if you wanted, but I like, because I know that I'm printing on 8.5 by 11 paper, I might as well get the most out of my paper and print two up. So I am going to make the width here 8.5 and the height 11. I'll click this top arrow here so that the white space will end up at the bottom. So I click OK. And then I'm going to duplicate this image by right clicking and duplicate layer. You can give it the layer a name if you want. Layer 1's fine with me for the purposes of this. And then I'm going to drag this down. Line it up. And now I'm ready to print this one and the other. Print. And I'm using an HP LaserJet. This is an older version. There are newer versions now. I'll put a link to some of the more recommended, more modern versions that will work for you if you're looking to get a laser printer for this purpose. And then I'm going to, and I set my printer profile to let Photoshop manage the colors, and I set to black and white. And I'll click print. Okay, so I have printed out these images on my laser printer. So you need to make sure that you're printing on a toner-based machine. So you want to print using a laser printer which dispenses toner, and as opposed to Inkjet, which dispenses ink that soaks into the paper. The toner sort of rests on the paper, and so that's toner is what causes the resist that lets the image stick to the plate. You can also make copies of this as long as the copier that you're using is not Inkjet, is a toner-based copier. And again, these are being printed on regular copy paper. This is Staples brand multi-purpose paper. And we are ready to try out our prints. So I dispensed a small amount. I'm using Liquitex Basics Mars Black, and I like to use a dark color for the image. And I'm dispensing the paint on the plate, a very thin sort of coat, bringing off any excess paint. And you wipe that off there on my paper towel. I take my image, and that's why I use Pixabay, because it does allow you to use the images without requiring attribution. However, you could always give attribution to the photographer. It's always a good thing and a nice thing to do if you want. So we brought them over to Photoshop, and we applied a threshold to them. And what the threshold does is that there's a set threshold, and any color that's lighter than one particular color goes to white, and anything that's darker than that threshold number goes to dark. And that's a throttle that you can adjust. You can accomplish something similar if you're using like an iPhone app or an Android app on your phone, by converting it to grayscale and cranking the contrast. And you have to crank the contrast a few times when you do take that method, and you'll need to experiment with that because it's not always as successful as using the Photoshop method. But once you have these images formatted, then you come over and you do the process we did, where you lay down a layer of a dark color base. I like to use a dark brown or a black. I also find that the heavier body works better on the image prints, but that's just me. I've seen people successfully do image transfers using craft acrylic paint, and that's fine. That's going to end up being a preference. I invite you to try both ways. But anyway, we ended up with these wonderful images, and I thank you for watching. I hope that you learned something here. If you did, and you're watching this on my YouTube channel, if you found value, give it a thumbs up. That helps signal YouTube that this is of value and that other people might like to see it as well. And if you like to see other videos like this regarding gel plate printing and other mixed media videos, then also subscribe. I'd appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and have a great day.